Sandra's Second Chance, a story of pain, strength, and hope. Sandra was 28 years old when she got married. Like many young women, she dreamed of building a happy family. She imagined a home filled with laughter, a husband who would love and support her, and children who would grow up surrounded by peace and affection. On her wedding day, she looked beautiful and hopeful. Family and friends gathered to celebrate what they believed would be the beginning of a wonderful journey. Sandra stood beside the man she loved and promised to spend the rest of her life with him. She had no idea that the journey ahead would become the greatest struggle of her life. The first few months of marriage seemed normal, but gradually things began to change. Sandra noticed that her husband showed little interest in providing for the family. He rarely worked consistently and always found excuses whenever responsibilities arose. At first, Sandra was patient. She told herself that every marriage had challenges. She believed that with time things would improve. Whenever bills arrived, she paid them. Whenever there was a shortage of food, she found a way to provide. Whenever there was a financial emergency, she handled it alone. Months turned into years. Sandra became both mother and father in the home, while her husband contributed almost nothing. She worked long hours to make sure there was food on the table. She paid the rent, settled utility bills, bought clothes, and ensured the family lacked nothing. The burden was heavy, but she carried it because she believed that was what a good wife was supposed to do. Instead of appreciating her sacrifices, her husband became increasingly difficult. He criticized her constantly. No matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. He said she was not the first woman to feed her family, and she won't be the last. If she came home tired, he complained. If she expressed her frustrations, he accused her of disrespecting him. Sandra slowly became trapped in a cycle of emotional suffering. The woman who had once been full of confidence began doubting herself. The woman who used to smile freely became quiet. The dream she once had for herself slowly disappeared. Yet she stayed. Not because she was happy, not because she was weak, but because she believed things could still change. Then Sandra became pregnant with her first child. When her son was born, she felt a joy unlike anything she had ever experienced. Holding her baby in her arms made every sacrifice seem worthwhile. She promised herself that no matter what happened, she would give her son a good life. A few years later, she welcomed a beautiful daughter into the world. Now she had two precious children, a boy and a girl. They became her entire world. Whenever life became overwhelming, she looked at them and found the strength to continue. But raising two children while carrying all the financial responsibilities alone was exhausting. Many nights Sandra cried herself to sleep after everyone else had gone to bed. Sometimes she would sit in darkness after her children were asleep, wondering why life had become so difficult. She remembered the hopeful young woman she had once been. She remembered the dreams she had carried into marriage. She barely recognized herself anymore. The years continued to pass. Her husband remained the same. He offered no support. He made no effort to change. Instead, he became increasingly controlling and emotionally draining. Sandra felt as if she was carrying a mountain on her shoulders every single day. Friends and family occasionally noticed that something was wrong. Whenever they asked if she was okay, she smiled and said she was fine. But inside, she was breaking. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Sandra returned home exhausted from work. She had spent the entire day trying to earn enough money to keep the household running. Yet instead of receiving gratitude, she was met with complaints and criticism. That night, after putting her children to bed, she stood in front of a mirror. For a long time, she stared at her reflection. The woman staring back at her looked tired. Her eyes no longer sparkled. Her smile had disappeared. The confidence she once carried was gone. At that moment, Sandra realized something that changed her life forever. She had spent 6 years trying to save a marriage, but in the process, she had lost herself. The realization brought tears to her eyes. For years, she had sacrificed her happiness, her peace, and her dreams, hoping her husband would eventually change. But he never did. And she finally understood that she could not continue living that way. The decision to leave was not easy. Sandra worried about her children. She worried about being judged by society. She worried about becoming a single mother. She worried about the uncertainty of the future. But she also knew that staying would continue destroying her emotionally. For weeks she prayed, reflected, and sought advice. Then one day she made the most difficult decision of her life. She filed for divorce. Many people questioned her decision. Some told her to endure. Others told her to think about the children. A few even blamed her. But none of those people truly understood what she had endured for 6 long years. Sandra knew that choosing peace was not selfish. Choosing herself was not selfish. Protecting her mental and emotional well-being was not selfish. The day the divorce became final, Sandra experienced mixed emotions. There was sadness. There was disappointment. There was grief for the marriage she had hoped would succeed. But there was also relief. For the first time in years, she could breathe freely. For the first time in years, she felt hope. The road ahead was not easy. She still had 2 children to raise. She still faced financial challenges. She still had painful memories. But something had changed. Sandra had found herself again. Slowly, she began rebuilding her life. She focused on her career. She spent quality time with her children. She learned to smile again. She rediscovered hobbies she had abandoned years earlier. She started believing in herself again. The woman who had once felt broken was becoming stronger every day. Her son and daughter watched their mother rise from pain with courage and dignity. They learned important lessons from her journey. They learned that love should never require someone to lose themselves. They learned that strength is not found in endless suffering, but in making difficult choices when necessary. Most importantly, they learned that their mother was a fighter. Years later, when Sandra looked back on her life, she no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw herself as a survivor. She saw a woman who had endured hardship and found the courage to begin again. The marriage had ended, but her story had not. In fact, her real story was only beginning. Because sometimes life breaks us apart not to destroy us, but to rebuild us into someone stronger than we ever imagined. And for Sandra, walking away was not the end. It was the first step toward freedom, healing, and the beautiful future she deserved. After 6 years of pain, Sandra finally found something she had been missing all along: herself.